I think the government have made a big mistake here by not including LPG gas in the temporary business energy support scheme that's designed to help viable businesses to survive in the current spike in energy prices. This has excluded many rural businesses unfairly from this support scheme. Minister, you must appreciate that the fear and the anger when businesses across rural Ireland were informed by Revenue that the Business Energy Support Scheme will only apply to those metered in the supply of gas and electricity. As people in Mayo are all too aware, Maine's natural gas is simply, it's not available in that part of the country. This doesn't make sense at all, and I think it was a mistake. I think it was an unintended consequence, because it means that businesses in rural Ireland that rely on the bulk gas purchase of LPG are denied access to the scheme, and these businesses, like many others, have seen unsustainable increases in their energy costs. And again, rural Ireland and Mayo seem to be an afterthought for the government. I really want to go back on this thing to get it right. I hope that it was an oversight and that it would be addressed. But disappointingly, when I raised this with the previous minister, he said that he will not review the scheme until after the scheme has closed at the end of February, when it's too late for businesses to access the support. This is wholly unacceptable, and it risks doing irreparable damage to our rural economies. The government must see the reason and allow all businesses to access the support. Businesses in Mayo and across rural Ireland cannot afford to be treated in this unfair manner. This has to be put right. You know, you have all the auditing things in terms of revenue, so you can tell how much energy is being used this year, how much it cost, how many units have been used, and what was used last year. You can get the differential in that, and it can be quantified in order to be able to be given to be included in this support scheme. There's completely no reason whatsoever why it can't be. These businesses are employing people in places like Achill, like Ballina, like Belmullet, all of these areas across the county. They deserve much better than this, Minister. I'm asking you to please go back and look at this and reverse it and right the wrong.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I thank both deputies for raising this really important question. And Deputy Conway Walsh will be aware that I have a very strong interest in Mayo, with significant family and family businesses there, and very good understanding of the pressures that are faced right across Mayo and other parts of rural Ireland. And indeed, your constituency colleague, Deputy Dillon, raised this in the context of ministerial questions with Minister McGrath this evening also, and it was raised in that context also. And can I just cut to the chase around the reasons for it, and because that's specifically what you've raised, and we can provide further detail then. But specifically, I mean, the difficulty with that, many of the businesses that you're describing will have received broad supports through the EWIS scheme and a whole range of different supports throughout COVID. So there's no intention whatsoever to exclude businesses of any particular geographical position or any particular type. The specific issue around oil and liquid petroleum gas being excluded from that scheme was that they were not supplied by way of a meter. And it would be, and this was Revenue pointing this out and Finance pointing this out at the time of the devising of the scheme, that it would be difficult to accurately determine the actual usage for each claim period, the relevant unit price for each claim period, and the actual increase in that unit price and usage over the same time frame in the reference period. And I know Deputy Farrell, as spokesperson on public expenditure in particular, will have a concern around how schemes are structured and to make sure that they can be captured in a way where Revenue is able to accurately assess what is being done. As you know, the scheme generally opened up in the end of November for registration and on the 5th of December for claims, and indeed I believe that there's a €12 million worth of claims, of which close to 11 have been paid out. But I do believe this is still early days in taking up the scheme, but that doesn't address the specific point that you've made around businesses specifically with oil and oil and LPG as energy sources. The TIBA scheme is available to all tax-compliant businesses carrying on trade, the profits of which are chargeable to tax under Case 1 or Case 2 of Schedule D. It also applies to sporting bodies and charities who carry out trading activities. So there's no intent to exclude businesses or services. It is simply a matter of how that is recorded. Now, Deputy or Minister McGrath this evening recognised that The scheme was due to end at the end of February of this year. There is provision in the Finance Act, I think from section 100 to 102, to extend that to the end of to April, and indeed to look at the caps. And Minister McGrath this evening on his questions did indicate that he would be looking at the operation of the TBES scheme for the first 3 months, as indeed the Department of Finance and the Government did in respect of other schemes that were designed to provide supports through difficult periods. Once the eligible business has passed the, let me just set out the facts for the House more broadly. To be eligible to make a claim under the TBES scheme, a business has to be able to demonstrate that the average unit price for electricity, gas, as the case may be, on the relevant bill has increased by 50% or more as compared to the average unit price in the reference period. So it is very tightly analysed and assessed to be able to make that comparison. So in broad terms, that's the average unit price in the month that is 12 months prior to the month in which the relevant bill arises, and that's obviously the energy cost threshold. But I hear what both deputies are saying in relation to, can we do something more, can we work on this? And I would urge both deputies to contribute to that review and make specific ideas about how that can be captured in the revision or devising of any new scheme, how you can capture the specific problem about measuring the use, the actual cost and the change over time in circumstances where you're dealing with something that isn't metered in the course of ordinary business.
Minister, the crux of the matter here seems to be in terms of the auditing and showing the exact usage and the measurement thing. So if we can prove to you, which I, beyond any doubt whatsoever, believe that we can prove to revenue the exact usage, the number of units and the exact costs, and do absolute comparisons in the same way as can be done anywhere else, then can this scheme then be applied retrospectively to those who have missed out in the last number of months to this scheme? I think that's where we need to hone in on. But I 100% can provide that evidence to you or to revenue, or get the businesses to supply it to revenue. There's nobody here looking to avail of anything whatsoever that they're not entitled to, or to abuse the system in any way. Everything is up front and everything can be audited. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I completely appreciate the point that both deputies are making, particularly in respect of auditing. I obviously can't, this scheme is devised under European framework and is also subject to state aid rules. So it is not simply me or a lack of desire. It is not the department. It is constructed as a state aid, under the state aid rules, as a particular intervention measure. So we have to be compliant with all of those rules as well. So please don't let me go further than I can in any of that. But what Minister McGrath has said is that he is going to look at the operation of the scheme to see in broad terms, and if there are ways in which it can be adapted for the future. I would just say, however, that, and you're correct obviously to point out the difficulty that weeks or months in any business's life can have on the viability of their business, particularly many tourism businesses over the winter period, where it's particularly difficult to get business just because of the seasonal nature of it. I think when you look at the scheme and you look at how it's been operated versus expectations, I think you also have to look at energy prices and where they are relative to expectations. And actually energy prices are, despite them having been so extraordinarily high, they're much lower than we had expected at this time of year. And the period, both because of the energy price changes in relation to oil and gas generally on the wholesale market, but also the considerably warmer weather than expected for that period, has meant that bills haven't been, although they have been exceptionally high, and I think particularly in that August-September period, I saw it in my own constituency, but they haven't been as high as we might have expected. Prices for just to give you some additional, wholesale gas prices are currently expected to be about 57% lower in the first quarter of this year than they would have been versus expectations in October 2022. And of course the winter period isn't over, and gas prices and oil prices remain very considerably higher, but it is considerably lower. The gas price. So it is simply a point to make. But we continue to urge eligible businesses to make claims under the scheme. The window for making claims is very important. Revenue has endeavoured to make it as easy as possible. But again, I appreciate that speaks to the application of the scheme more broadly, and not the specific point that you're raising in respect of the management of that part of the scheme, or the exclusion of that part of the scheme.